Ravenwood, Illinois had never seen a trial like this. On a cold November morning, 18-year-old Lilith Cross walked into the county courthouse with a smile that made the victim's parents physically recoil. Her black bangs fell across wide, innocent eyes. Her voice, when she spoke to her attorney, was soft and girlish. But when the doors opened and the grieving family entered, something shifted. The smile turned into something else. A laugh bubbled up from her throat, hysterical and bright, echoing off the marble walls. For Lilith Cross, this was not justice. This was theater. This was her stage. The charge read involuntary manslaughter, a tragic accident between two young women. The prosecution would claim otherwise. They had messages. They had a timeline that did not add up. They had witness statements that contradicted her story. And somewhere, hidden in the digital evidence, they had recovered something that would end the performance forever. A video, a confession. A moment of truth captured in ones and zeros that even her most brilliant lies could not explain away. As Lilith took her seat at the defense table, she winked at a news camera positioned near the jury box. She was already convinced she had won. By the time the judge spoke her name for the last time, the smile would be gone, and the courtroom would finally learn who Lilith Cross really was. The courtroom filled slowly that first morning. Judge Margaret Holloway entered, her black robe flowing behind her like a shadow. She was in her early 60s, a woman whose career had been built on fairness and an unflinching commitment to the truth. Her eyes swept the room, taking in the defendant, the families, the press gathered in the back rows. Lilith Cross sat at the defense table beside her attorney, Marcus Webb, a public defender in his 40s who had handled dozens of cases, but none quite like this one. Lilith wore a pale blue sweater and dark jeans. Her hair was pulled back neatly. She looked like any college freshman home for the holidays. Innocent, young, fragile. The arraignment began with the reading of charges. The clerk stood and announced the case. The people of the state of Illinois versus Lilith Marie Cross. The charge, involuntary manslaughter in the death of Anna Catherine Morrison, age 19. The prosecutor, District Attorney Catherine Reeves, stood at her table. She was a woman in her 50s, with silver-streaked hair and a reputation for thoroughness that bordered on obsession. She had spent 3 weeks building this case, and she knew it was stronger than the charge suggested. Much stronger. Judge Holloway addressed the defendant directly. Miss Cross, you have been charged with involuntary manslaughter. Do you understand the charge against you? Lilith stood. Her voice was small, wounded. Yes, Your Honor. How do you plead? Not guilty. The words came out with a slight tremor. She glanced at the jury box, empty now but soon to be filled with 12 people who would decide her fate. Her lips curved upward just slightly. It was a smile that suggested she found something amusing in all of this. Marcus Webb shifted uncomfortably beside her. He had spent 2 hours the previous evening trying to coach his client on courtroom demeanor. Lilith had listened with that same small smile, nodding at all the right moments, and then completely ignored every piece of advice he had given her. Judge Holloway continued. The court accepts the plea of not guilty. Miss Reeves, would you like to outline the state's case? Catherine Reeves stood. Her movements were deliberate, controlled. Your Honor, the state will prove that on the night of September 14th, the defendant lured Anna Morrison to an abandoned warehouse on the east side of Ravenwood. The state will prove that what happened next was not an accident, as the defense will claim, but a calculated act of violence. We will present forensic evidence, witness testimony, and digital records that paint a very different picture than the one Miss Cross has been telling. She paused, letting her words settle over the room. The victim, Anna Morrison, died from blunt force trauma to the skull. The defense will claim she slipped and fell. The evidence will show otherwise. Lilith leaned toward her attorney and whispered something. Her hand covered her mouth, but her shoulders shook with suppressed laughter. Several jurors in the gallery, seated there for jury selection, noticed. They exchanged glances. Marcus Webb's jaw tightened. He whispered back urgently, "Stop, now." But Lilith could not help herself. This was too easy, too predictable. She had planned everything so carefully. The location, the timing, the story. Anna had slipped. Anna had fallen. It was tragic, yes, but it was an accident. And accidents, no matter how unfortunate, were not crimes. Judge Holloway set a trial date for 2 weeks later and dismissed the court. As the room cleared, Catherine Reeves gathered her files and watched Lilith Cross walk toward the exit. The young woman moved with confidence, her head held high. She stopped to speak to a reporter near the door, her voice rising just loud enough for others to hear. "This is all a terrible mistake," Lilith said, her eyes wide and glassy with manufactured tears. "Anna was my friend. I would never hurt her. Never." The reporter scribbled notes furiously. Lilith touched her arm gently, a gesture of vulnerability, and then continued out into the cold November air. Catherine Reeves turned to her assistant, a young attorney named David Park. "Did you see that? The laughing? That and everything else? She thinks this is a game." David Park nodded slowly. "Do we have enough?" Catherine considered the question. They had a strong, circumstantial case. They had motive, jealousy over a scholarship both young women had applied for. They had opportunity, text messages that proved Lilith had asked Anna to meet her that night. They had forensic evidence that suggested the fall was not accidental. But they did not have the one thing that would seal the case beyond any doubt. Not yet. "We will," Catherine said quietly. "Detective Hale is still working on the phone records. If there's anything there, he will find it." The trial began on a gray Monday morning 2 weeks later. The jury had been selected, 6 men and 6 women, ranging in age from 25 to 68. They sat in the jury box, their faces neutral, their notepads ready. Judge Holloway called the court to order and nodded to Catherine Reeves. "The state may present its opening statement." Catherine stood and walked to the center of the courtroom. She did not use notes. She had memorized every word, every pause, every inflection. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this case is about a young woman who believed she was smarter than everyone else. Smarter than her peers. Smarter than the police. Smarter than you." She gestured toward Lilith, who sat perfectly still at the defense table, her hands folded in her lap. Anna Morrison was 19 years old. She was a sophomore at Ravenwood Community College. She had dreams of becoming a nurse. She was kind, hardworking, and well-liked by everyone who knew her. On the night of September 14th, she received a text message from the defendant asking her to meet at an old warehouse on the east side of town. Anna went. She trusted Lilith. They had known each other since high school. Catherine paused, letting the silence build. What happened next, the defense will tell you, was an accident. They will say Anna slipped on a loose piece of metal grating and fell, striking her head on the concrete floor. They will say Lilith tried to help her, called 911, and stayed with her until paramedics arrived. They will paint their client as a victim of circumstance, a young woman traumatized by witnessing her friend's tragic death. She turned back to the jury. But the evidence will tell you something very different. The evidence will show you that Anna Morrison did not slip. She was struck. The angle of impact, the force required, the specific location of the injury, all point to one conclusion. This was not an accident. This was murder. And the person responsible is sitting right there. Lilith did not flinch. She stared straight ahead, her expression serene. Marcus Webb stood for the defense. He was a careful man, methodical in his approach. Ladies and gentlemen, the prosecution wants you to believe my client is a monster. They want you to see malice where there is only tragedy. But the facts are simple. 2 young women went to an abandoned building. One of them fell. One of them died. It is heartbreaking. It is devastating. But it is not murder. He walked toward the jury box, his hands open, his voice calm. The state will present theories. They will show you forensic reports and timelines and witness statements. But at the end of this trial, you will see that none of it proves intent. None of it proves my client wanted Anna Morrison dead. What you will see is a terrible accident and a young woman who has been unfairly accused. The first witness was Officer Daniel Brennan, one of the responding officers the night of the incident. He was in his late 30s, broad-shouldered, with the careful diction of someone who had testified in court many times before. Catherine Reeves walked him through the basics. The 911 call had come in at 9:43 in the evening. The caller, Lilith Cross, had been hysterical, nearly incoherent. She said her friend had fallen and was not breathing. Paramedics and police arrived within 7 minutes. They found Anna Morrison lying face down on the concrete floor of the warehouse, blood pooling beneath her head. Lilith was kneeling beside her, sobbing. "What was the defendant's demeanor when you arrived?" Catherine asked. She was upset, crying. She kept saying it was an accident, that Anna had slipped. Did she provide any other details? She said they had come to the warehouse to talk. She said Anna had been walking near the edge of the platform on the 2nd level and lost her footing. And where was the body found? On the ground floor, approximately 15 feet below the platform. Catherine nodded. "Thank you, Officer Brennan. No further questions." Marcus Webb stood for cross-examination. "Officer Brennan, when you arrived, was there any indication that my client had harmed Miss Morrison?" "No." "Did my client attempt to flee?" "No." "Did she refuse to cooperate with your investigation?" "No." She answered all our questions at the scene. So to be clear, my client called for help, stayed with the victim, and cooperated fully with law enforcement. Is that correct? Officer Brennan hesitated. "Yes, that is correct." Marcus Webb returned to his seat, satisfied. Lilith leaned toward him and whispered, "See? Easy." But the next witness was not so easy. Detective John Hale was a veteran investigator with 23 years on the force. He had worked hundreds of cases, from petty theft to homicide, and he had learned to trust his instincts. When he arrived at the warehouse that night, something felt wrong. He could not articulate it at first, but as he walked the scene, examined the platform, studied the blood spatter pattern, the feeling grew stronger. Catherine Reeves questioned him methodically. "Detective Hale, can you describe what you observed at the scene?" The victim was found on the ground floor. The defendant claimed she had fallen from the platform above. But when I examined the platform, I noticed something unusual. There was no evidence of a slip. No scuff marks, no disturbed dust. Nothing to suggest someone had lost their footing. And what did that tell you? It told me we needed to look more closely at the defendant's story. Did you collect any physical evidence from the platform? We collected samples of dust, metal shavings, and trace fibers. We also photographed the entire scene extensively. And the victim's body? The victim had a single impact wound to the back of the skull. The medical examiner later determined the injury was consistent with blunt force trauma. Catherine paused. Detective, in your professional opinion, was this injury consistent with a fall? Marcus Webb stood. Objection. Calls for speculation. Judge Holloway considered. Overruled. The detective may answer based on his training and experience. Detective Hale looked directly at the jury. In my opinion, no. The angle and force of impact suggested the victim was struck, not that she fell. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Lilith's smile finally faltered. She glanced at her attorney, her eyes narrowing. Marcus Webb made a note on his legal pad, underlining it twice. Detective Hale, Catherine continued, did you investigate the defendant's background? Yes. We learned that both Miss Cross and Miss Morrison had applied for the Daniel Scholarship, a full ride to a 4-year university. It is highly competitive. Only one recipient is selected each year. And who received the scholarship? Anna Morrison. The implication hung in the air. Motive, jealousy, a reason to want Anna Morrison gone. Marcus Webb's cross-examination was aggressive. Detective Hale, you testified that you found no evidence of a slip on the platform. But is it not possible that any such evidence was simply not visible? It is possible, but unlikely given the conditions. Unlikely, but possible. And you also testified that the injury was consistent with blunt force trauma. But could that same injury not also result from a fall? It could, yes. So, to be clear, your conclusions are based on possibilities, not certainties. Is that fair? Detective Hale's expression hardened. My conclusions are based on 23 years of experience investigating crime scenes. I know the difference between an accident and an intentional act. But you cannot prove it, can you? You have no eyewitness, no confession, just your opinion. I have evidence, Detective Hale said quietly, and that evidence speaks for itself. The trial continued through the week. The prosecution brought in forensic experts who testified about blood spatter patterns, impact angles, and force calculations. They brought in Anna Morrison's friends, who described a tense relationship between Anna and Lilith in the months leading up to the scholarship decision. They brought in a digital forensics specialist who explained that Lilith's phone had several deleted files that had been partially recovered. Can you explain what you found? Catherine asked. The specialist, a woman named Dr. Ellen Cho, nodded. When we examined Miss Cross's phone, we found that several files had been deleted in the hours following the incident. Text messages, photos, and at least one video file. Were you able to recover these files? Partially. Some of the text messages were recovered. They showed Miss Cross expressing anger toward Miss Morrison. Phrases like, "She does not deserve it," and "I will fix this problem." Lilith sat rigid in her chair. Her hands gripped the edge of the table. Marcus Webb whispered urgently to her, but she did not respond. Her eyes were fixed on Dr. Cho. And the video file? Catherine asked. We were unable to recover it at that time. The data was too corrupted. At that time, Catherine repeated. But you continued working on it? Yes. We sent the phone to a specialized lab with more advanced recovery tools. And did they have success? Dr. Cho glanced at Judge Holloway. That is still under analysis, Your Honor. We expect results within days. Catherine Reeves smiled slightly. No further questions. The defense presented its case the following week. Marcus Webb called character witnesses, people who had known Lilith since childhood. They described her as smart, ambitious, but fundamentally good. Her high school teachers spoke of her academic achievements. Her neighbors said she was polite and helpful. But under cross-examination, cracks appeared. "Miss Thompson," Catherine said to one of Lilith's former teachers, "you testified that Lilith was an excellent student. Did she ever display competitive behavior?" "Well, yes. All top students are competitive." "Did she ever become upset when she did not receive the highest grade?" Miss Thompson hesitated. "There was one incident. She believed another student had cheated on an exam and received a higher score. She reported it to the administration." "And had the student cheated?" "No. The accusation was unfounded." "So Lilith made a false accusation against a classmate because she was upset about her grade?" "I would not characterize it that way." "How would you characterize it?" "She was mistaken, that is all." But the damage was done. The jury saw a pattern. A young woman who could not accept being second, who lashed out when she felt wronged, who believed the rules did not apply to her. Lilith testified in her own defense. Marcus Webb had advised against it, but she insisted. She took the stand wearing a gray dress and pearl earrings. Her voice was steady as she recounted the night Anna died. "We went to the warehouse to talk," she said. "Anna had been avoiding me since she won the scholarship. I wanted to clear the air. I thought maybe we could be friends again." "What happened when you arrived?" Marcus Webb asked. "We talked for a while. She was standing near the edge of the platform, looking out at the city. I was a few feet away. Then she turned suddenly, and I think she must have stepped on something loose because her foot slipped and she went over the edge. I tried to grab her, but I could not reach her in time." "What did you do next?" "I ran down the stairs and called 911. I tried to help her, but there was so much blood. I did not know what to do." Her voice broke convincingly. A tear rolled down her cheek. Catherine Reeves stood for cross-examination. She walked slowly toward the witness stand, her eyes never leaving Lilith's face. "Miss Cross, you testified that you and Anna were friends. Is that correct?" "Yes." "But you also testified that she had been avoiding you. Why would a friend avoid you?" "I think she felt guilty about the scholarship." "Guilty? Why would she feel guilty about earning something she deserved?" Lilith's expression flickered. "I just meant she knew how much I wanted it too." "Did you want it more than she did?" "I do not know." "Did you resent her for winning it?" "No." "You did not resent her at all?" "No." Catherine walked back to her table and picked up a document. "Your Honor, I would like to enter into evidence text messages recovered from the defendant's phone." She handed copies to the judge, the defense, and the jury. "Miss Cross, can you read the message dated September 10th, 4 days before Anna's death?" Lilith looked at the paper. Her face paled. I do not remember writing this." "Please read it for the jury." Lilith's voice was barely audible. "It says, 'She does not deserve it. She only got it because they felt sorry for her. I should have won.' That does not sound like someone who was happy for her friend, does it?" I was upset. People say things they do not mean when they are upset. "And the message dated September 13th, the day before she died?" Lilith did not answer. "Shall I read it for you? I will fix this problem, one way or another." Catherine looked up. "What did you mean by that, Miss Cross?" "I meant I would move on. Find another scholarship." "You did not mean you would eliminate the competition?" No, of course not. Then why did you ask Anna to meet you at an abandoned warehouse in the middle of the night? I told you I wanted to talk. At 9:30 at night, in a dangerous location, where no one would see you. It was not like that. Catherine leaned closer. What was it like, Miss Cross? Tell us what really happened. I told you what happened. She fell. She fell, just like you planned. Objection. Marcus Webb was on his feet. Counsel is badgering the witness. Judge Holloway nodded. Sustained. Miss Reeves, move on. But Catherine had made her point. The jury saw Lilith's composure crack. They saw the anger flash in her eyes. They saw the mask slip, just for a moment. The turning point came on the 8th day of trial. Catherine Reeves stood and announced that the state had additional evidence to present. The courtroom fell silent. Marcus Webb looked up sharply from his notes. Lilith sat very still, her hands folded in her lap, but her knuckles were white. Your Honor, Catherine said, the state calls Dr. Michael Torres, Senior Digital Forensics Analyst with the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Dr. Torres was a slight man in his 40s, with wire-rimmed glasses and the careful manner of someone who spent most of his time with machines rather than people. He took the stand and was sworn in. Catherine established his credentials methodically. He had a doctorate in computer science. He had worked for the Federal Bureau of Investigation for 15 years. He had testified as an expert witness in over 100 cases involving digital evidence. Dr. Torres? Catherine began. Were you asked to examine a mobile phone belonging to the defendant? Yes. The phone was sent to our lab 3 weeks ago with a request to recover deleted files. And were you successful? Yes. We were able to recover several deleted text messages, 3 deleted photographs, and 1 deleted video file. The courtroom seemed to hold its breath. Lilith's face had gone completely blank. Marcus Webb leaned forward, his pen frozen above his notepad. Can you describe the video file? The file was approximately 4 minutes and 17 seconds in length. It was recorded on the defendant's phone on the evening of September 14th, the same night as the victim's death. The metadata indicates it was deleted approximately 30 minutes after the victim's death. And what does the video show? Dr. Torres looked uncomfortable. Your Honor, I believe it would be more effective to show the video to the court. Judge Holloway nodded slowly. The court will allow it. Miss Reeves, please proceed. A screen was set up at the front of the courtroom. The lights dimmed. Catherine Reeves pressed play on a laptop connected to the projection system. For a moment, there was only darkness and the sound of breathing. Then the camera came into focus. It was pointed at Lilith's face. She was in the warehouse, the industrial background clearly visible behind her. Her hair was pulled back. Her eyes were bright with excitement. This is going to work, she said to the camera, her voice clear and confident. I have thought through every detail. She will come here thinking we are going to talk. She trusts me. She is so stupid that way. She laughed, a sound that made several jury members visibly recoil. I have already set up the scene. The loose grating, the blood trail I will create, the 911 call I will make. By the time anyone figures out what really happened, I will already have my story straight. Poor Anna slipped and fell. Poor, tragic Anna. The video jumped forward. Time had passed. Now the camera was positioned on a ledge, pointing toward the platform. Anna Morrison appeared in the frame. She was wearing jeans and a jacket, her blonde hair tied back in a ponytail. She looked uncertain, glancing around the empty warehouse. Lilith? She called out. Where are you? Up here. came Lilith's voice from off-camera. Anna climbed the metal stairs to the platform. The two young women stood facing each other. The audio was faint, but the video captured their body language. Anna looked confused. Lilith looked calm. They spoke for several minutes. The jury strained to hear the words. Then, suddenly, Lilith moved. It was fast, deliberate. She picked up a metal pipe that had been lying near the edge of the platform, hidden from Anna's view. Anna saw it too late. She raised her hands defensively, started to back away. Lilith swung the pipe with terrible precision. The impact was sickening. Anna fell backward, tumbling over the edge of the platform. Her body hit the concrete floor below with a sound that echoed through the warehouse and through the silent courtroom. Lilith stood at the edge, looking down. She picked up the camera. Her face filled the screen. She was breathing hard, but she was smiling. "Smile for court," she whispered to the lens. Then the video ended. The lights came back on. The silence in the courtroom was absolute. Several jury members were crying. Others looked physically ill. The victims' parents were holding each other, sobbing openly. And Lilith Cross sat frozen at the defense table, her face completely drained of color. The performance was over. The mask had shattered beyond repair. Marcus Webb's hands were shaking. He stood slowly. "Your Honor, I need to request a recess to confer with my client." Judge Holloway's voice was cold. "Request denied. Miss Reeves, you may continue." Catherine Reeves walked toward the witness stand. "Dr. Torres, how can you be certain this video was recorded by the defendant's phone?" "The metadata embedded in the file contains the phone's unique identifier. It is an impossibility that this video was recorded on any other device." "And the timestamp?" "The timestamp shows the video was recorded at 9:28 on the evening of September 14th. The 911 call reporting the victim's death came in at 9:43, 15 minutes later. So this video was recorded minutes before the defendant claimed Anna Morrison accidentally fell." "That is correct." "And the video clearly shows the defendant striking the victim with a metal pipe?" "Yes." "Is there any possibility this video was altered or fabricated?" "We conducted extensive analysis. The video is authentic. It has not been edited or manipulated in any way." Catherine turned to face the jury. "Ladies and gentlemen, you have seen the evidence with your own eyes. The defendant planned this murder. She recorded her plan, she executed it, and then she smiled for the camera and said, 'Smile for court.' She believed she would get away with it. She believed she was smarter than everyone in this room." She walked back to her table. No further questions. Marcus Webb did not cross-examine. What could he possibly ask? The video spoke for itself. His client had confessed to murder, filmed the act, and documented her own premeditation in her own words. He sat down heavily, avoiding Lilith's gaze. Judge Holloway addressed the witness. "Dr. Torres, you are excused." She looked at Catherine Reeves. "Does the state have any further witnesses?" "No, Your Honor. The state rests." "Does the defense wish to present any additional evidence?" Marcus Webb stood. His voice was flat. "No, Your Honor. The defense rests." The closing arguments were brief. Catherine Reeves summarized the evidence methodically. The texts showing motive, the forensics showing intent, the video showing premeditation and execution. "The defendant believed she could fool you," she told the jury. "She believed she could perform her way to freedom. But the evidence does not lie. Justice for Anna Morrison demands a guilty verdict." Marcus Webb's closing was short and defeated. He asked the jury to consider the defendant's age, her lack of prior criminal history, her potential for rehabilitation. But his heart was not in it. He knew what the jury had seen. He knew what they would do. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours. When they returned, the foreman, a middle-aged man who owned a hardware store, stood and delivered the verdict. In the case of the People versus Lilith Marie Cross, on the charge of murder in the first degree, we find the defendant guilty. Lilith made a sound, a small, broken gasp. Her hands flew to her face. All the arrogance, all the smirking confidence, all the performance crumbled in an instant. She looked suddenly very young and very frightened. Marcus Webb put a hand on her shoulder, but she flinched away. Judge Holloway set a sentencing hearing for the following week. Lilith was remanded into custody immediately. As the bailiff placed handcuffs on her wrists, she looked out at the courtroom. Her eyes found the camera she had winked at weeks ago. She did not wink now. She did not smile. She looked away, and the bailiff led her through the side door that led to the holding cells. The sentencing hearing took place on a Thursday morning. The courtroom was packed. News vans lined the street outside. This case had captured national attention. An 18-year-old woman who filmed her own murder, who smiled for the camera after killing her friend, who thought she could manipulate the system with lies and tears. The victim impact statements came first. Anna Morrison's mother took the stand. She was a small woman in her 50s, her face lined with grief. She held a photograph of her daughter. "Anna was my only child," she said, her voice breaking. "She was kind and smart and so full of life. She wanted to be a nurse. She wanted to help people. And this monster took her away from me because of jealousy. Because Anna won a scholarship that she deserved." She looked directly at Lilith. "You cannot perform your way out of this. You cannot smile and cry and pretend. We all saw what you are. We all know what you did." Anna's father spoke next. He was a tall man with a gray beard, and his hands shook as he held the podium. "I do not understand how someone so young could be so evil. I do not understand how you could plan something like this, film it, and then lie about it. My daughter trusted you. She thought you were her friend, and you killed her for a scholarship, for money, for pride." His voice rose. "I hope you spend the rest of your life thinking about what you did. I hope you never know another moment of peace." Several of Anna's friends spoke as well. They described her kindness, her humor, her dreams. They talked about the hole her death had left in their lives. And through it all, Lilith sat at the defense table, her head bowed, silent. Finally, Judge Holloway addressed the court. "Miss Cross, please stand." Lilith stood slowly. Her legs trembled. Marcus Webb stood beside her, a hand on her elbow to steady her. Judge Holloway looked at her for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice carried the weight of absolute moral authority. "Miss Cross, in my 30 years on the bench, I have presided over hundreds of criminal trials. I have seen crimes of passion, crimes of desperation, crimes born from addiction or mental illness or circumstances beyond the defendant's control. I have seen people make terrible mistakes in moments of weakness. But I have never, in all my years, seen anything quite like this." She gestured toward the evidence table where the recovered phone sat in a clear plastic evidence bag. "You did not make a mistake. You did not act in a moment of weakness or passion. You planned a murder. You lured a young woman, someone who trusted you, to an isolated location. You prepared your weapon. You set up a camera to record your crime. And then you executed her. You struck her with such force that her skull fractured. You watched her fall. You watched her die. And then you picked up your camera, looked into the lens, and said, "Smile for court." Lilith's shoulders began to shake. Tears streamed down her face, but Judge Holloway did not pause. You called 911. You manufactured tears. You played the role of the devastated friend. And you believed, truly believed, that you were smart enough to get away with it. You believed you could manipulate the police, the prosecutors, this court, and the jury with your performance. You winked at cameras. You smirked during testimony. You treated this trial like it was a game you had already won. The judge's voice hardened. But this was not a game. This was justice. And justice does not care about your performance. Justice cares about truth. The truth is that you are a murderer. You took a human life not because you had to, not because you were threatened or afraid, but because you were jealous. Because Anna Morrison achieved something you wanted. Because, in your narcissistic worldview, you deserved that scholarship more than she did. And when you did not get it, you decided she did not deserve to live. Lilith collapsed into her chair, sobbing. Marcus Webb helped her back to her feet, but she could barely stand. The video you recorded shows us exactly who you are, Judge Holloway continued. It shows us a young woman with no empathy, no conscience, no regard for human life. You thought that video would help you in court. You thought you could delete it and it would disappear. But you were wrong. Technology does not forget. The truth does not disappear just because you want it to. She paused, letting her words settle over the courtroom. You have shown this court no remorse. Even now, I see no genuine understanding of what you have done. I see fear of consequences, but I do not see remorse. I see concern for yourself, but I do not see grief for your victim. You are crying because you were caught, not because you are sorry. The judge opened a folder on her bench. The prosecution has recommended the maximum sentence allowed by law. The defense has asked for leniency based on your age and your potential for rehabilitation. I have considered both arguments carefully. I have reviewed the evidence. I have watched that video more times than I care to count. And I have reached a conclusion. She looked directly at Lilith. You filmed yourself committing murder. You documented your premeditation. You showed us in your own words and your own actions that you are a danger to society. You have no respect for human life. You have no respect for the truth. You have no respect for the law. And I have no confidence that you can be rehabilitated. You are 18 years old, barely an adult. But you committed an act of such calculated cruelty that it defies comprehension. Judge Holloway's voice dropped lower, each word deliberate. This court's responsibility is not just to punish you for what you have done. It is to protect society from what you might do in the future. And based on everything I have seen, I believe you would do this again if given the opportunity. You would plan it. You would execute it. You would lie about it. And you would believe, once again, that you could get away with it. She picked up her gavel. Therefore, it is the judgment of this court that you be sentenced to 35 years in the state penitentiary for the crime of murder in the first degree. You will be eligible for parole after serving 25 years. You will be transferred to the adult correctional system upon your 19th birthday. This court further recommends that you receive psychological evaluation and treatment during your incarceration, though I hold little hope that such treatment will be effective. Lilith let out a wail, a sound of pure anguish. She turned to Marcus Webb, grabbing his arm. "Please," she sobbed. please, you have to do something. But there was nothing to be done. The judge had spoken. The sentence was final. Judge Holloway was not finished. I want you to understand something, Miss Cross. You will spend the next 3.5 decades, the entirety of your youth and much of your middle age, behind bars. You will not attend college. You will not build a career. You will not have the life you planned. All because you could not accept that someone else was better than you. All because your pride and your jealousy mattered more to you than another person's life. She leaned forward. Anna Morrison would have been 20 years old next month. She would have been finishing her sophomore year of college. She would have been studying, making friends, falling in love, living her life. But she is dead. And she is dead because of you. I want you to think about that every single day for the next 35 years. I want you to imagine the life she should have had. I want you to carry the weight of what you took from her family, from everyone who loved her. Lilith could not speak. She could barely breathe. The weight of the sentence, the reality of what lay ahead, crashed over her like a wave. 35 years. She would be 53 years old when she was eligible for parole. Her entire life, everything she had planned, everything she had wanted, was gone. Judge Holloway raised her gavel. This court is adjourned. The gavel fell with a sharp crack that echoed through the silent courtroom. The bailiff took Lilith's arm. She did not resist. She moved like someone in a dream, or perhaps a nightmare. As she passed the prosecution table, she glanced at Catherine Reeves. The prosecutor met her eyes with no triumph, no satisfaction, only a quiet sadness for all the lives destroyed by one person's terrible choice. The victim's family watched as Lilith was led away. Anna's mother held the photograph of her daughter against her chest. Anna's father put his arm around his wife. They did not speak. There were no words that could fill the space Anna had left behind. Outside the courtroom, reporters crowded around Catherine Reeves. "Do you believe justice was served?" one asked. Catherine considered the question. Justice cannot bring Anna Morrison back. It cannot undo what was done. But it can ensure that the person responsible is held accountable. In that sense, yes, justice was served. What about the video? How did Miss Cross think she would get away with it? Narcissism is a powerful drug, Catherine said quietly. She believed she was smarter than everyone else. She believed her performance would be enough. She was wrong. Inside the courthouse, in a small holding cell, Lilith Cross sat on a metal bench. The tears had stopped. Now, there was only numbness. She thought about the warehouse, about Anna standing on the platform, about the weight of the pipe in her hands. She thought about the moment of impact, the way Anna had looked at her with such confusion and betrayal in the seconds before she fell. She thought about the camera, about her own face smiling into the lens, about the words she had spoken. Smile for court. She had smiled. She had performed. And the court had seen through every second of it. A guard appeared at the cell door. Time to go. Lilith stood. She followed the guard down a long corridor through a series of locked doors into a van that would take her to the state prison where she would spend the next 3.5 decades. As the van pulled away from the courthouse, she looked out the small window at the gray November sky. She thought about Anna Morrison, 19 years old, lying on a cold concrete floor. Her life ended by a single terrible act of violence. And for the first time, perhaps the only time, Lilith Cross felt something approaching genuine remorse. Not for herself, not for the consequences she faced, but for Anna, for the life she had taken, for the person she had destroyed. It was too late for that remorse to matter. Too late for it to change anything. But it was there, a small flicker in the darkness. Whether it would grow or fade, only time would tell. The courthouse emptied slowly. The press packed up their cameras. The jury members went home to their families, carrying the weight of what they had witnessed. The judge returned to her chambers and sat in silence for a long time, thinking about justice and punishment, and whether any sentence could truly balance the scales after a life had been taken. Anna Morrison's parents drove home to an empty house. They passed her bedroom, still decorated with posters and photographs from high school, and they did not go inside. They could not bear to. Not yet. Maybe not ever. In the weeks that followed, the trial became a national story. The video, heavily edited to remove the most graphic content, was shown on news programs across the country. Experts debated how an 18-year-old could commit such a crime. Psychologists discussed narcissistic personality disorder. Legal analysts examined the case as an example of the power of physical evidence in the digital age. But in Ravenwood, Illinois, people simply tried to move on. They held memorials for Anna Morrison. They established a scholarship in her name. They tried to remember her for who she was, not for how she died. The warehouse where Anna died was demolished 6 months later. The city cited safety concerns, but everyone knew the real reason. No one wanted that building standing as a monument to what had happened there. The lot sat empty for years, a patch of weeds and broken concrete, until eventually a community center was built on the site. It was named the Anna Morrison Community Center. There was a plaque near the entrance with her photograph and a quote she had once written in a high school essay. "The measure of a life is not what you achieve, but what you give to others." Lilith Cross became inmate number 87,412. She was processed, photographed, fingerprinted, and assigned to a cell in the women's correctional facility. She took classes. She worked in the prison library. She met with a psychologist twice a week. Slowly, over months and years, some of the arrogance faded. The performance ended. What was left was a young woman who had made a choice that destroyed 2 lives, hers and Anna's, and who would spend decades trying to understand why. She wrote letters to Anna's parents. They were returned unopened. She wrote to her own parents. Those letters were sometimes answered, but the responses grew shorter and less frequent as the years passed. She wrote to Marcus Webb, thanking him for trying to defend the indefensible. He wrote back once, wishing her well, and then the correspondence ended. In her 10th year of incarceration, Lilith was granted permission to take online college courses. She studied psychology, trying to understand the mind that had led her to do what she did. She read about empathy, about moral development, about the ways human beings justify terrible acts to themselves. She saw herself in those pages, and she felt something close to horror at what she had been. By her 15th year, she had earned a bachelor's degree. By her 20th year, she had completed a master's degree in social work. She began volunteering with at-risk youth, conducting sessions via video call, sharing her story as a warning. She told them about the scholarship, about the jealousy, about the choice she made. She told them about Anna Morrison, about the life she had taken, about the decades of regret that followed. Some of the young people listened. Some did not. But she kept trying. Catherine Reeves retired from the district attorney's office after 27 years of service. She was asked in an interview what case stood out to her the most. She did not hesitate. The Lilith Cross case, because it showed me that evil is not always what we expect. It can look like an 18-year-old girl with a bright future. It can smile at cameras and cry on command. But the truth always comes out. Always. Detective John Hale worked another 8 years before retiring. He kept a photograph on his desk of Anna Morrison, taken at her high school graduation. It reminded him why he did the work, why every case mattered, why giving up was never an option. Judge Margaret Holloway presided over hundreds more cases before her own retirement. But she never forgot the Lilith Cross trial. She never forgot the video, the arrogance, the performance that crumbled when the truth was finally revealed. She never forgot the way Lilith's face had changed when the sentence was read, the way the reality of consequences had finally broken through the wall of narcissism. And she never forgot Anna Morrison, a young woman who deserved so much more than the life she was given. Years turned into decades. The world moved on. New crimes made headlines, new trials captured attention. But in Ravenwood, Illinois, people remembered. They remembered Anna Morrison. They remembered the trial. They remembered the video that showed the world exactly what happened in that warehouse. And in a cell in the women's correctional facility, Lilith Cross remembered too. She remembered every detail of that night. The weight of the pipe, the sound of impact, the way Anna had looked at her in that final moment, the way she had smiled at the camera afterward, so certain she would get away with it. She had been wrong, terribly, irrevocably wrong. And she would spend the rest of her life living with that truth. In her 32nd year of incarceration, 3 years before her parole eligibility, Lilith received a visitor. It was a journalist writing a book about the case. She agreed to the interview, though she did not know why. Perhaps because she wanted to tell her story one more time. Perhaps because she hoped somehow that sharing what she had learned might prevent someone else from making the same choices. "Do you regret it?" the journalist asked. Lilith looked at her hands. They were older now, lined in ways that hands of a 50-year-old woman should be. "Every day," she said quietly. "Every single day." "Do you think you can ever make up for what you did?" "No." The answer was immediate and certain. "Nothing I do will bring Anna back. Nothing I do will undo the pain I caused. The best I can do is try to live in a way that honors her memory. Try to prevent others from going down the path I took. Try to be honest about who I was and what I did." "And who were you?" Lilith took a breath. "I was a narcissist. I was arrogant. I believed I was smarter than everyone else. I believed I deserved things more than other people. And when I did not get what I wanted, I decided that the person who did deserved to die." She met the journalist's eyes. "I was a monster. Maybe I still am. I do not know. All I know is that I took a life, and nothing I do will ever change that." The interview was published as the final chapter of the book. It became a bestseller. Some readers felt Lilith's regret was genuine. Others believed it was just another performance, a calculated attempt to appear remorseful for the parole board. The truth, as it so often is, was probably somewhere in between. Lilith Cross came up for parole after serving 25 years. She was 43 years old. The hearing was brief. Representatives from Anna Morrison's family appeared via video call to argue against parole. They spoke of their continued grief, of birthdays and holidays celebrated without Anna, of grandchildren she would never have. They asked the board to deny parole. Lilith's attorney presented evidence of her education, her volunteer work, her psychological evaluations showing significant personal growth and low risk of reoffending. He argued that she had served her minimum sentence and demonstrated genuine rehabilitation. The parole board deliberated for 3 hours. When they returned, the chairwoman delivered the decision. Parole was denied. Lilith would be eligible to apply again in 5 years. Lilith accepted the decision without visible emotion. She had expected it. Perhaps she even agreed with it. She returned to her cell, to her studies, to her volunteer work. She would try again in 5 years, and if that failed, she would try again 5 years after that. For however long it took, because that was the reality of what she had done. She had taken a life, filmed it, smiled about it, and tried to lie her way to freedom. The court had seen through her performance. The jury had delivered justice, and the consequences of her actions would follow her for the rest of her life. Whether she was behind bars or eventually, someday, released back into the world. The story of Lilith Cross and Anna Morrison became a cautionary tale. It was taught in criminal justice classes as an example of premeditation and the power of digital evidence. It was discussed in psychology courses as a case study in narcissistic personality disorder. It was referenced in debates about juvenile sentencing and the age at which individuals should be held fully accountable for their actions. But for those who knew Anna Morrison, for those who loved her, it was not a case study or a cautionary tale. It was a tragedy. It was a young life ended too soon. It was potential unrealized. It was grief that would never fully heal. And that, perhaps, is the truest measure of justice. Not the length of the sentence, not the viral video that exposed the crime, not the courtroom drama or the judge's condemnation, but the simple acknowledgement that a life was lost, and that loss can never be undone. The empty chair in the courtroom, the one where Lilith Cross had sat throughout the trial, remained in place long after the case ended. It was just a chair, wood and leather, no different from any other chair in that courtroom. But to those who had been there, who had watched the trial unfold, who had seen the performance crumble and the truth emerge, that chair represented something more. It represented accountability. It represented the moment when arrogance met consequence. It represented the truth that no performance, no matter how convincing, can stand against evidence. It represented justice, imperfect and incomplete, but justice nonetheless. And on quiet days, when the courthouse was empty and the light streamed through the tall windows, if you looked at that chair, you might almost believe you could see the ghost of a smile, frozen in time, a reminder of the 18-year-old who believed she could get away with murder. She could not. She did not. And 35 years would pass before she would have another chance at freedom, if that chance ever came at all.